Providence, Georgia, 1956. A storm was coming. Way off in the distance, its inky edges began to spoil the late morning sky. A low roll of thunder grumbled from the ground, tickling the bottom of my bare feet. "How many more?" Etta May said, holding the front of her dress out before her like a basket. "A bushel or two." I plucked another cicada shell from the bark of a pine tree that grew in the far corner of Mama's old thinking spot. Etta May giggled. "I love you, a bushel and a peck," she sang, her voice holding that sort of magic that shot clean through, like winter static, through anyone who listened. This is the beginning of The Cicada Tree by Robert Gwaltney. Welcome, Robert, to Blackbird Writers Presents Author Interviews. I'm so glad to be talking to you today.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So The Cicada Tree is your debut novel. And
Yes.
Oh, wow. It's a beautiful historical mystery fiction. And the main character is the young girl, Annalise Newell, who is an 11-year-old whiskey drinking prodigy. I love that description of her. So tell us a little bit about the book and about your inspiration.
Sure. So The Cicada Tree takes place in 1956. Annalise Newell, who, as you said, is an 11-year-old whiskey drinking prodigy, it's the summer that she first meets the wealthy Mayfield family, a family that possesses this otherworldly beauty that other people call that Mayfield shine. It's this initial meeting that sort of stirs obsession with Annalise and sets her down a path of dangerous games and manipulation, uncovering secrets along the way, ultimately that obsession culminating in a cataclysmic plague of cicadas.
Yeah. And that is amazing how these girls conjure that. So there's a little bit of magic and fantasy in this book as well, which makes it, I think, that much more beautiful. So the characters and setting are not fictional. It's so vivid and real. It takes place in Georgia. And what connections do you have with Georgia?
So I've lived in the South all of my life and in Georgia for a great deal. There was just a passive time. I grew up in a small town called Cairo, Georgia, in Grady County in Southwest Georgia. I attended college in Tallahassee, Florida State University, and I moved to Atlanta in 2000, and I've been here for the last 23 years. So the South really is all I know.
Yeah. So that's cool. And you put that into your books so well. The major players in this book were all women, namely Annalise and her mother, and then Etta May and her grandmother. Tell us a little bit about these ladies and their relationships.
Sure. So Annalise's mother is Grace Newell. And at some point in the story, Miss Wessie, who is the mother of a friend of Grace's, who has a granddaughter named Etta May, circumstances occur such that they begin to cohabitate and support one another financially to be able to keep their lives moving forward and to be able to sustain themselves. And there really is something. So in the book, really men play a very minor role. They're in the shadows. They really only come out to stir trouble. And then, of course, the women are there left to sort of write things. But there's something remarkable about each of the women. Of course, Annalise is a piano prodigy. The summer of 1956 is the first time she tastes music and the first time that she sees music. Her friend, Etta May, who's a 10-year-old Black girl, has a beautiful operatic voice that you would classify as a coloratura soprano. And Annalise suspects that Etta May's voice, that there's a magical quality about it that can manipulate the emotions of others and perhaps even impact the natural world around them. Her mother, Grace, was bitten by a snake in church when she was a little girl. And since that time, she's been able to see glimpses of the future in the stitches that she sews. And Miss Wessie, who was a grandmotherly figure and who's one of my favorite characters in the book, really, I think, possesses the greatest ability, and that's common sense.
Yeah. No, and I love Miss Westy a lot. She was always the voice of reason, and she just brought that sense of order to everything.
Yes.
But you mentioned that Annalise is able to taste music. That's a really rare form of synesthesia.
Right, exactly. I played with the concept of synesthesia and gave it a supernatural edge. So, I mean, I sort of had a sense of what synesthesia is and how it typically occurs in people. But in this world, in Providence, Georgia, 1956, Annalise was really literally able to taste the music that she plays and that she hears others play. And at
Mhm.
some point, when Etta Mae is singing, probably about the second act of the book, she actually sees music for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the two of them working together, magic happens. I won't give anything away.
And trouble happens.
Trouble. Well, yeah. But the story's message is more about friendship, and that's really awesome. You touch on some racial issues in the story, from especially from the 1950s. There's definitely some racial tension, and Etta Mae and her grandmother Wessie are both Black women living with white women, with Annalise and her mother who are white, and so that creates kind of a stir around town. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Annalise has a sense that that the family is held in some interesting, to some degree, some interesting regard, that there might be some undercurrent of something there that she just can't quite put her fingers on. And of course, the relationship is unusual in that, you do have a white family and a Black family cohabitating together, really sustaining and supporting one another. So, but of course, there are some other reasons why, of course, people are looking at that family and wondering and gossiping.
Yeah, that's true. But the friendship between the two girls is so dear, and like they have this incredible sisterhood. For lack of a better word, they just like so close.
No, I agree. I do think that it is a coming of age story.
Hmm.
And it's Southern, and I say it has Gothic tendencies, and elements of magical realism. But I didn't realize it's interesting. I was having a conversation with a writer friend of mine. Her name is Kimberly Brock. She has this wonderful book that's come out called The Lost Book of Eleanor Dare. And she had shared with me a personal loss early on that she experienced in life. And I shared with her that I'd had a sister who was born after me, who had been born with spina bifida, who passed away before she was the age of 2. And I was around 4. But I remember it vividly. I remember the loss. I remember um, that sense that the world really wasn't a safe place, not even, for children. And that, no matter how hard you tried, or how hard your parents tried, they really couldn't keep you from that one awful thing. And that's death. Or they could attempt to protect you, but they couldn't really keep you completely safe. And so I shared that with her about that early loss. And she says, and after she had read the book, she goes, "Oh, I understand why you did what you did with the book." And I did not realize until that moment, it just hit me. I said, I have written about sisterhood. And then I think in some odd way, I've probably always been looking for sisters. And I think that's, how that came to be.
Yeah. And because that must have been really hard for you as a
Right.
child to live through that. And maybe your sister is still with you.
Yeah, well, I think so. I do think that, I think that people are energy, and I think that
Yeah.
that that they fold into our memories. So I do think they're with us. And I think maybe, my imaginings of what, our lives might have been like together, perhaps maybe I was able to capture that just a
Yeah.
little in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, the you talked about the women all have unusual talents. Um, and the whole book is filled with so much magic. Um, tell our viewers how all of these elements came together for you as a writer?
So yeah, the story actually started as quite a different book. I started to write a book that was going to take place in the 1970s, and the protagonist was going to be an 11-year-old boy, and his mother was Annalise Newell Darlington, and about 3 or 4 chapters in, she became so interesting to me on the page. And she's making these really awful and interesting parenting choices. So I just, how we do as writers, we started asking our characters questions. And I'm like, well, what must have you been like as a girl to be this way now? And I just began to imagine what she might have been like as a little girl. And that's really how the Cicada Tree came to be.
Oh, wow.
And in the elements of magical realism, I think I was maybe 3 or 4 chapters in when I had that aha moment that it is when it just appeared to me that something threaded through with some element of magical realism needed to happen in that moment. And that's when the book really came alive for me, and I found my momentum. And I really think it was in those moments probably that I truly found and discovered my voice as a writer.
That's really interesting. I love to hear how authors' first drafts actually change so much, through the process, and I don't think that a lot of readers know that, they think that writers have some kind of magic ability to just tell a story or whatever, but it takes a lot to get from A to a finished novel.
It does. I mean, just the challenges of having more than 2 people in a room can be overwhelming, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's an interesting process. I think I have, with the Cicada Tree, I had a sense of how I had a sense of the beginning, the middle, and the end. And then for me, and I don't plot to the point where I know that everything is going to happen. For me, that sort of takes the magic away from the process. And I love being able to discover from day to day when I am writing where the characters are going to take me. Of course, I do have the guidepost. I know that, okay, about here, the character, this needs to have happened, and then this needs to have happened by the end of the book. And I'm mindful of that as I write, so I don't veer off course.
Yeah, you and I actually have a very similar writing plan, I guess, or lack of plan, either way. But I always have a very good sense of the story, but I love to pants it too, because like you said, it's that moment of discovery.
There was I was listening in on an interview with a writer named Christopher Swan who writes thrillers, Southern thrillers. And one of the women asked him on the panel, well, so what's your process? And he just smiled and said, oh, you're so sweet to think I have a process.
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
Yeah. Well, and some authors do. They really need to write out and have, an idea of each scene before they can begin putting it down.
Exactly. Yes, some people have to know everything that's going to happen. And I think some genres maybe require that more than others, perhaps.
Probably. That's probably true. So how did you come up with the idea of the Cicada Tree?
The Cicada Tree, I remember a summer, I was probably about 10 years old, and we had a brood of cicadas. You have 13-year cicadas, you have 17-year cicadas, and then you have the annual cicadas.
Yeah, I had to look all that up.
Yeah, it's quite complex. It's quite an interesting biological happening. And I remember that summer, and I remember being so fascinated. I mean, we were covered up with cicada shells. They were all over the pine trees and fence posts and wherever they could cling to on wood siding and bricks. And I remember pulling them from trees, and we would put the cicada shells on our shirts, and we put them in our hair. And it was very macabre.
Yeah.
So I think I always had that memory, when when I was trying to write, Annalise, an 11-year-old, I tried to be mindful of my own 11-year-old self and that sort of sense of wonder and the lens that I looked at life through. And for me, it just seemed if this is going to take place in the summer, I just felt like the cicadas worked on many levels, metaphorically and as a great plot device.
Yeah, I thought so too. And I've never put cicada shells in my hair.
You need to try it.
Oh, okay. I'll take your word. So do you have a favorite author who has been your inspiration?
God, I think that that there have been so many writers that have had influence on me. I know early on I was such a fan of the Brontes, who really sort of introduced me to the Gothic, the original Gothic tradition, Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre. I was fascinated by those stories, and one of my favorite Dickens stories is Great Expectations, and there's a character in it, Miss Havisham, who I think is just one of the most amazing characters in the history of fiction. And then Truman Capote, of course, Tennessee Williams, Carson McCullers. There's so many writers who I admire. Modern writers. I think one of my favorite novels of all time is not a Southern. It's literary fiction, and it's Michael Cunningham's The Hours, and it was adapted to film some years ago, and he won the Pulitzer for it. But it was just so beautifully and artfully crafted. I was just in awe of that book.
I will add that to my list.
I
Yeah,
think you'd like it.
yeah. So, well, thank you so much for talking with me today. Can you tell viewers where to find you if they want to see more about your books or where they can reach out?
Absolutely. So I have a website, robertlgwaltney.com, and the links to my social media, Facebook and Instagram, are there as well. And you have access to send me emails via my webpage. And if you're interested in purchasing the Cicada Tree, you can purchase it anywhere books are available. If you like to order things online, there's Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target. And of course, if you like to support your independent bookstores, which I hope that you do, you can ask for a copy from them.
Yeah, great. We love indie bookstores.
We do. They're our
Yeah.
friend.
Well, thanks for everything. It was great to chat with you again today, Robert. And you can find more interviews at blackbirdwriters.com. Thanks.